All right, so today we are going to be talking about wealth building habits, which is a favorite subject of mine. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. Like Carrie mentioned, I am originally from the Dominican Republic. I moved here to the US when I was 12 years old, and my relationship with money has been very much affected by my immigration story. And I am very passionate about helping other folks change their relationship with money. And part of that is understanding how our brain works, how we are motivated to change our behavior. And this is why I love talking about habits and learning about the way that our brains work and using that information to apply it to our money. So, what are we talking about today? First, I want to talk about what are habits and why are they important. We are going to cover the process of building habits. And of course, we are all here to learn about money. So, throughout the presentation, I am going to be relating the information to money. And then we're going to talk about how do we change habits that maybe are not serving us or they're not helping us get closer to where we want to be. So before we get into the meat of the presentation, I want to give some credit and also share a couple of resources. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today, in terms of the science of habit formation, come from two books, Atomic Habits by James Clear. I actually have my copy right here. Highly recommend this book. I read it every year as a reminder. It is excellent. And also Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg. So those two books focus on the science behind of like how we are able to work on building habits and also the opposite, breaking habits that we no longer want. All right, so let's get into it. What are habits and why are they important? Habits are any behavior or routine practice. It could even be a thought or like a way of thinking that you repeat enough times. So, these things are happening over and over again that it almost becomes automatic and almost like involuntary. You don't have to put a lot of thought into doing these things. It takes absolutely no energy. And one example that I like to give that perhaps some of you might be able to relate to is sometimes when you get in the car and you drive somewhere that you drive to regularly and you get to the place where you're going and it's almost like surprising that you're there because you don't remember like getting there. It's like, oh my God, I'm here. How did I even get here? Has anybody had that experience before? That's sort of the what I'm talking about. It like happens so automatic that you're not even like conscious, you're not putting any energy, any thought into it. Yeah, so some people can relate to the example of the car. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about habits. So I am curious if folks want to share in the chat if there is a particular habit that you are very proud of or that you feel that it has served you really well. And it doesn't have to be anything related to money. It can be if you want to, but it could be something that you're like, you know what, this thing that I do regularly really helps me out. Taking vitamins every day. Yes, that is a good one. I'm actually working on that one myself. I'll share one. One thing that I do, and again, it's like something that I sort of like do automatically, and it seems silly, but I always clean up my kitchen like after I cook, so I don't have any drama about it. It's just like something that I do kind of like automatically, and I think it really like helps me just like get it done, right? And not let it like pile up. All right, some people are sharing switching from cream and sugar in coffee to drinking black. Ooh, and it has helped you lose 50 pounds. Wow, that is incredible. And we're going to talk about that, how little tiny changes that we can make that like really build up. Writing to-do list. Oh, I love a to-do list. Sometimes I put things that I have already done on my to-do list just so that I can check it off. That's how much that's how much I love me a to-do list. Yes, I feel that I cannot focus until I have a clean environment. Same. All right, so we have some habits that we are proud of. Okay, so why are habits important? Why do our brains do this like very quirky thing of making some things almost automatic? And the reason is because it is a way for the brain to conserve energy. So our brains are working super hard all the time, and it actually takes a lot of resources, a lot of energy and calories for your brain to do its work. When something becomes a habit, your brain kind of like goes like an autopilot for that particular thing. So then you're not using up energy while you're doing that particular activity. So now your brain is free to focus on other things. So we cannot possibly be responsible for being on for every single thing that we have to do, because then we wouldn't be able to pay attention to other things that we need to pay attention to, or we wouldn't be able to learn, we wouldn't be able to, focus on getting work done and things like that. So the brain needs for some things to be sort of like happening in the background on autopilot. The other thing that is important about habits, and it was sort of like mentioned with the example of the coffee, is that when we have little bits of effort that happen consistently over time, those little efforts can amount to something big. So rather than having to do like a big push to make something happen, you can do something small regularly that will get you that big win at the end. And the last reason that I want to highlight for why habits are important is that habits are a way of reinforcing the type of person that you want to be. So when you are repeating a behavior over and over and over again, it starts changing the way that you see yourself. So for example, if someone works on the habit of saving money, like becoming a saver, and they start saving money every week, with time, when they're repeating that behavior over and over again, they will start seeing themselves as someone that is a saver, someone that's like just like part of your identity. So it is very important to realize that the things that we are repeating on a regular basis are the things that are going to start forming how we see ourselves in the world. I'm just going to take a second to look through the chat. Oh, someone says that they are familiar with Atomic Habits, and Ooh, drinking water. I have an example about water too. That was actually one of the habits that I also worked on after reading the book was figuring out how to drink more water. Okay. All right. So why do I want to talk about habits and the science behind habits when it comes to money? And the reason is with my work, I talked to a lot of people that came to me and they saw themselves as someone that was not good with money. And people usually talk about, not being good with money as if it is something that you are born with, like a trait, like I have dark hair or, I have brown skin. I am bad with money. And a lot of times we feel like we are failing, like it's a moral failing that we don't know how to handle our money in a way that is helping us get to where we want to go. But in reality, managing money has to do with habits, right? And the behaviors that you repeat with money over and over again. So I want people to start seeing managing money as something that we need to like work on, just like we're talking about taking our vitamins or drinking enough water, maybe like going to bed at a reasonable time. I want us to start seeing money in that same category rather than thinking that, oh, I'm failing as a person because I don't have these money habits in place that are helping me get to where I want to be. I also think that changing our mindset around money to looking at it as a lack of like a habit rather than a moral failing can help us go from I am bad with money to I am working on building the habit of, maybe saving or investing or, spending less than what I make. And to me, that feels more in line with a growth mindset rather than, again, thinking that it is something that you don't have any control over and it's more action focused, right? We are focusing on what is it that we have to do, what is the habit that we have to build, rather than getting into feeling negatively about ourselves or having a lot of shame around money. So I think it gives you an opportunity to work on something very concrete rather than something that's very abstract, like I want to become better at money or something like that, which like what does that even mean, right? That can look different for everybody. All right, so now that we have talked about what are habits and why they're important and how they relate to money, let's get a little bit into the science of it. So how do we build a habit? How does this happen? Okay, so first, in order for a habit to start forming, you first need a cue. So a cue is going to be something that happens in your environment that will signal to your brain, oh, you have to pay attention. So it could be something that you see, something that you hear, something that you smell, something that you feel, but something will happen in your environment that will say, hey, time to pay attention. This is important. Once your attention is like peaked, then you will feel a craving. You will feel a desire to do something to change whatever is happening in your environment. Once you feel that desire, that motivation to like, ooh, let's just say like, ooh, I feel cold. I want to feel warm instead. What can I do? Then you will do an action so that will be your response to that desire of you changing something in your environment. And that action that you take will either feel good, like you will be rewarded for taking that action, or maybe it won't feel so good. And whether it feels good or bad, then that will decide whether you want to repeat that action again. So obviously, if it feels good, our brains are wired for pleasure. We like to repeat things that feel good. So if it feels good, most likely the next time you experience that cue, you will say, your brain will remember, I remember last time I did this and I felt the motivation to do something and I did it and I liked the response that I got. So then you will start sort of like repeating that behavior. So let's look at an example. Um, let's maybe take Starbucks, for example. Your prompt could be that you are walking down the street and you see Starbucks sign. So that's something that you're seeing with your eyes, or it could be a lot of times you walk by Starbucks and you smell the coffee. So it could be that you smell the coffee. Then once that happens, you will start craving. You say, I'm feeling kind of sleepy. Maybe I want a coffee. And you will have a response. And maybe you will walk into Starbucks and you will order a coffee. And you'll take a sip of that coffee and you will really enjoy, how you feel after. So that's like sort of like the cycle that will happen. And of course, this can happen with with anything. It could be like, oh, I am on social media. I see one of the people that I follow talking about how they went to Target and got this amazing, I don't know, blanket, and you will start, having that craving, that desire. Oh, I want to have that blanket too. And then you will take an action, maybe go to the Target website and you will maybe buy that blanket. And then your reward will be that you get a dopamine hit in your brain, the good chemicals in your brain because you just bought this thing that your friend just said that was amazing. So that's sort of like the loop that happens. One thing that I want to mention, and this comes from BJ Fogg, the author of the Tiny Habits book. BJ talks about the relationship between motivation and ability. So in order for you to want to make an action, take a step, your motivation levels have to be really high. And sometimes if they're not that high, then the action that you have to take has to be easy. So let's go back to the example of the coffee. So, for example, let's just say that Starbucks is at a building in, I don't know, the 20th floor, and there's no elevator. You see the Starbucks sign, and you have that thought of like, I want a coffee. I'm craving a coffee. That sounds really good. If your motivation is very high, you will say, you know what, I will walk up 20 flights of stairs to get that coffee because this desire is like really big and I'm willing to do that. So then you will walk yourself up, 20 flights of stairs, and then you will get your reward. But maybe if your motivation is not that high, you might say, you know what, like I do kind of want a coffee, but I am not willing to put in the effort, right? So your motivation has to be really high in order for you to take that action. And I think this is really important to think about when we are thinking about habits that we want to work on, because we have to be honest with ourselves about our level of motivation. Or sometimes it's not even about motivation, but maybe like your capacity to do something, right? So if you know that like my motivation or my capacity to do something difficult right now, it's not that high, then you have to make the action that you have to take super easy. So I always like to talk about this because of that, and we're going to like bring it all together. But I wanted to, you have high motivation, but what if you can't afford the coffee? So that's when capacity comes into play, right? So you could be super motivated, but something else is not allowing you to take that action. So, you know, the say that goes with what I was like talking about. You have to be honest with yourself about what you're able to do, and then you have to like make it really easy. So maybe uh you can solve that problem by saying, okay, like I really want that coffee. I have the motivation, I cannot afford it, so maybe I'm going to make the coffee at home. So you will have to like make a trade-off there. But that's a good question. And again, it's like the sort of like thinking that we have to have when we are thinking about like what habits are we going to work on? What do I have capacity for? So in this instance, you're talking about money as a resource, but maybe it might be time, you know, like what time do I have to dedicate to this particular task, or energy levels, right? Like, what else do I have in my life going on that's going to take up all of my energy? Okay, so once we decide, okay, I want to work on this particular habit, there are some things that will ensure that you're able to build that habit. And this particular piece comes from the Atomic Habits. And James Clear says that there are four laws that need to happen in order for a habit to be created. The first one is you have to make that first step, the cue, obvious. Then you have to make it really attractive. You have to make the thing that you want happen really attractive. So that's going to boost desire or motivation. Then you have to make that action very easy. And again, you have to take into consideration the relationship between motivation. So if motivation is high, then the action could be a little bit harder. But if the motivation is low, then you really have to focus on making it very easy. And then the last piece is you have to make sure that the action is satisfying. So there is a reward after you take that action. Because again, our brains are wired for pleasure, and we want to repeat what feels good. So let's talk about how do we make it obvious. And one way that one strategy that you can use to make something obvious is to use something that they call implementation intention. And that basically means you have to be really clear about what it is that you're doing. So I will add certain locations. So for example, instead of saying, I want to save more money, you can say, I will save $5 every Friday after I get my paycheck. So that right there tells you exactly what you have to do. So then your brain doesn't have to spend any time trying to figure out, wait a second, I said I wanted to save more, but is it like $2 or is it $10 or is it every Friday? Or you don't give your brain more work, you make it very simple. The other thing that you can do is you can use a habit that you already have as your cue to do the new habit. So one that I like to use is just like a really easy one that a lot of people can relate to is if you are working on the habit of flossing, a lot of us already brush our teeth, sometimes a couple of times a day. So then you can say, after I brush my teeth, which is the habit that you already have, I will floss. So then you're adding the new activity onto the thing that you're already doing. So, for example, relating it to money, it could be, a lot of us have to pay our bills at some point, right? You can say, when I'm paying my bills, I will send, whatever, $20 to savings. And so it's sort of like using that habit that you already have as your cue to do the new thing. And then the last one is to change your environment. And this is actually one that I used when I was like trying to work on drinking more water. And one of the things that I did was I make sure that I always had a water bottle in my car. And prior to becoming a financial coach, I was a teacher and I had to travel from school to school. So what I did was I made it a sort of like a rule that every time I get in the car, I will take a sip of water. And then I would make sure that I had my water in the car all the time to like make it easy for myself. So right there, I was using a couple of these strategies because I knew that every time I got in the car, that was my cue, get in the car and then drink the water. And the water was in the environment. So I had very, very little reasons not to do it. I made it very easy for myself. Okay, and this is something that you can use. Again, this is from the Tiny Habits book. BJ Cole said a recipe card. So it kind of like breaks it down for you. So after I get in the car, I will take a sip of water. And then the last piece of that is that you have to celebrate. And it doesn't have, like, some people hear that and they're like, how am I going to celebrate taking a sip of water? So it doesn't have to be this like big celebration, but it could just be like, you know what? Like in my head, I'm like, good for you, Oriana. You said that you were going to work on this like habit of drinking more water and you're doing it, like high five kind of thing. It just has to allow yourself to like feel that good feeling so that your brain wants to repeat that again. It's also healthy. Yes. Yes. So I can think about that, like, good for you. You're doing something good for your health. Way to go. All right. So how do we translate this to money? And I sort of like mentioned some of these, but you can say every time I get paid, I will do, whatever, like I will review my budget, or I will review my spending. I will plan my spending. I will send money to a savings account. Um, you can say, if I'm already in the habit of having a day when I pay my bills, then I am going to add on to that particular habit. So when I sit down to pay my bills, then I will do this. I actually have also heard of people get really creative with this one, and they say like if I buy something then I have to send the same amount of money to my savings account, or, something like that. So you can get creative and playful with it. And when it comes to like the environment, changing the environment, one thing that you can do is you can say, I know that being at Target is a very big cue, is very triggering for me to, maybe like go over my budget. And it might be that maybe you have to avoid Target for a little bit, or any other store. Okay, so the next strategy is to make it attractive, right? So it's that craving, like that second piece of it. How do we make that like really exciting? And some ways that you can do that are that you can pair an action that you have to do with something that you like to do. So for example, if you're working on like maybe moving your body more, you can say, I will walk on my treadmill, the thing that I don't want to do, maybe I'm not so excited about it, while I watch my favorite show, or while I listen to my favorite podcast. Another thing that you can do is maybe join a group where your desired behavior, the thing that you're working on, is the normal behavior for that group. And the last one is creating what they call a motivation ritual. And that basically just means that you will do something pleasant before the thing that maybe you're not so excited to do. So a lot of times, some of my clients can be a little bit like money avoidant, like they don't want to do anything that has to do with money tasks because it brings up a lot of anxiety or maybe like negative feelings. So we talk about, what can you do before? It could be like maybe like pump yourself up with your favorite song, or maybe have a favorite snack or something like that before you start doing the hard task. Or also you can do something nice like after. But the idea is to get your brain sort of excited to do the thing that you're not so excited to do. Okay, so make it fun. So try to find ways to make money tasks fun. Again, I'm a big fan of like having music in the background, maybe like lighting a candle. Maybe you make a rule that you do your budget at your favorite cafe. Maybe you have chocolate. I'm a big fan of seltzer and chocolate. Those are like my things that get me to do whatever it is that I don't want to do. I'm like, if I have to do it, I will do it with some seltzer and chocolate. Um, you can also join a group or maybe start a group, or if you have a partner or a best friend, a family member, maybe you can like work on things together. So then it's sort of like social time too, which feels good to the brain. And like I mentioned before, creating rituals and things that feel good when you have to do money tasks. All right, the next law is you have to make it easy, right? So you have to make that action very easy to follow through with. So one of the things that you can think about is how can you reduce the number of steps between what you need to do and the behavior that you're working on. So how can you make it really easy for yourself? And that could be maybe like you get things ready ahead of time so that you can make your job easier. So I always say, like, what can I do now that's going to make my life easier later? And I actually use that concept a lot, even with a lot of like tasks around the house. Cooking is one that comes to mind, even if it is like remembering to take out the meat. the day before so that like it's ready to go and I don't have to do that extra step of like defrosting the meat. So sort of like thinking about things in that way, like what are little steps that I can take that are going to make my life easier later. And another one that I like is there a way that you can decide something one time that is going to make sure that the thing that you want to do happens all the time? So a good example of that is if you want to work on becoming somebody that saves, becoming a saver, maybe the one decision that you can make is setting up like an automatic transfer uh, from your checking to your savings. So that's like a one-time decision that will ensure that that the behavior continues, but you don't have to make that decision every single time. Another one is start small. And a good question to ask yourself is like, what is the thing that I can do on my worst day? And that is the first step that I'm going to focus on. A lot of times I think we think too big and then it doesn't feel good and then our brains don't want to like repeat the behavior. So maybe if you are working on some people that I work with, they want to maybe work on eating out less. And let's say that you're eating out 5 days a week. Well, it's really tough to go from eating out 5 days a week to eating out like once a month. So maybe you can focus on one night a week or something like that. And then another thing that you can do to make things easy is to use, technology. It kind of goes back to that, like, is there something that I can do like a one time that is going to like help me get this thing done? So when it comes to your money, some things that you can do again is focus on what is it that's going to be easy? A lot of times, people come to me and they're like, "Oh, what's the best budget to follow?" And it sounds silly, but the best thing to do is the thing that you will do, right? Sometimes we want to be like really smart and efficient and like do it the best way. But sometimes the best way is the thing that's going to be like really easy for you to do, and that's okay. It might not be where you want to be ultimately, but it's the perfect place to start, and then you start, bringing it up a notch little by little as you get more comfortable. So start small, lean on that technology, use those automatic transfers. One thing when like people are wanting to maybe start investing for retirement, take advantage of the fact that you can do that through your employer and they do it automatically for you. So you don't have to like remember every single time. Another thing that I like to do is planning ahead. And I have here a no script. And that just means like maybe you have a pre-planned thing that you will say, like let's just say that maybe like you're working on not spending so much money maybe going out. So you can come up with a little sentence, a little thing that you will say whenever somebody invites you out. And if you have that ahead of time, again, when that situation comes, you don't have to spend time thinking about like, how am I going to respond? You have already decided this is what I'm going to say. And then you just say it and it saves you, so time and energy. Again, going back to the planning ahead and the idea around people, maybe wanting to spend a little bit less money on takeout and stuff like that. Maybe the solution is that you make sure that you have frozen food in your freezer so that when you're, tired, it's the end of the day, you're tired and you want to go and order out, you can just have like a frozen pizza that you throw in the oven or something like that. All right, the next rule is making it rewarding or satisfying. Um, and this is super important, and a lot of people want to skip this step because sometimes it feels silly, but it is super important that you take the time to feel good about whatever it is that you are doing. And again, it doesn't have to be this like big old celebration. It could be if you if you want to, but it could just be you taking a moment to just say, you know what, like good for you. I'm proud of you. And that will tell your brain, you know what, if this feels good, let's make sure that we repeat this behavior. When it comes to avoiding habits that maybe are not serving you as much, then at that point you want to make sure that you're focusing on the benefit that you are going to receive. So thinking about what is it that I'm gaining? Okay, maybe I'm having to say no to DoorDash tonight, but this is going to mean that, you know, as a family, we're going to get to go on this like vacation. So like trying to remind yourself what you're working for and you know, thinking about that. Um, Also, I think it's very important to be honest with ourselves with how we work and what is motivating to us. So, what is motivating to me as far as like what feels good and feels rewarding can be really different than somebody else. So, for example, some people um, hate feeling restricted, right? As soon as they feel like, okay, I only have this much to spend, they want to do the complete opposite. And if that's you, that's like totally okay. Then you work with that. Or some of us, you know, like this is me, some of us are like rule followers. And so if I come up with a rule of like, this is how I'm going to handle this situation, I want to follow that rule. But it might be somebody else might feel like they want to do the complete opposite because they don't like following rules. And I will give a silly example. I told my husband earlier this week that my rule is going to be that whenever I have to make a decision, I am going to choose the easy thing that I just decided like I need easy in my life right now. I do a lot of hard things, so when I'm deciding something, I will choose the easy way. And we were out of some eggs or you know something that we needed for food, and I had to make a choice whether I was gonna go to a store that it's you know more like less expensive, or if I was gonna go to the store that it's like on my way but I know I'm gonna spend double. And I said to myself, I made the rule that I'm gonna choose easy. So that was like very easy for me. I'm going to go to the store, I know I'm gonna be paying double, but I decided that in this stage of life right now, this moment for the next month, I am going to choose easy. So that's what I did. I knew that maybe that wasn't the financially smart thing to do, but I made my rule that I was going to go with easy. So I think that knowing yourself and knowing what is motivating to you, it's super important. So maybe like you're a competitive person, make it into a game, make it into a competition, like challenge yourself. But if you're somebody that a challenge feels crushing, then don't do that. And just knowing that there's like no right or wrong way to be, it's just the way that you need, and that's perfectly okay. The automatic transfer is a great tool. Yes, having a portion go to your checking account and having a portion to your savings account, that's great because it's done for you and you don't have to think about it, right? You don't have to make that decision every single time, and you don't have to decide how much do I send to checking, how much do I send to savings. It's just like done for you. You made that decision one time and then it's done. Okay, so how do we make things satisfying with our money? Again, kind of like going back to like, why are you doing this? That's why I always like to start with what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What is it that you're trying to do for your life? Because that's where the motivation is going to come in to do all the boring stuff. If we are completely honest, sometimes doing all the adult things that we have to do, it doesn't feel very great, right? Like sending money to retirement doesn't feel very great, except if you think about, you know what, that means that when I'm an old lady, I'm gonna be able to be on the beach. That's exciting, not the sending the money part, right? So you kind of have to like get clear on what it is that you're working towards. Again, it's like focusing on that, like what is it that you're gaining? Some people are visual, and it helps for you to have a visual reminder of what it is that you're working for. I'm also a big fan of getting creative with naming your bank accounts. So if you are maybe saving towards like a really fun trip, maybe like name your bank account that, so that every time you're sending money to that bank account, you're reminded like, oh, this is like my amazing Disney vacation, or whatever it is. Using visual trackers is good. Oh, I'm sorry. Where am I? I got lost for a second. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. So some people, like if they're saving or they're paying down debt, they like to see the physical change with the visual trackers. And make it, have fun with it. Like I said, some of these things are not very fun. So like, how can you bring some fun into it that's going to like keep you engaged? So if we put the science of how habits are formed and the four laws of habit creation, this is what it looks like. So we have number one, we have the cue. So we want to make sure that that's very obvious. Like, what is it that we have to do? The second step was the craving, that desire. So how can we make it like really attractive? How can we make ourselves want it more? Then the response has to be easy. How can we make it so that we can do it on our worst day? And the reward has to be really satisfying. So that is how you're going to ensure that whatever it is that this habit that you are working on, like sticks, and you want to repeat it. So what can this look like? Like for example, like if someone wants to build a habit of always learning and increasing their financial literacy, we can say, how can we make it obvious? We can say every morning when I get into the car to drive to work, I am going to listen to a podcast. And I can do this with like my favorite drink, make it really appealing. And I'm going to make it very easy by downloading the podcast ahead of time. So it's like ready to go when I get in the car. And then I'm going to make it like really satisfying by like celebrating after I listen to my podcast with like my favorite like hyping myself like song because I did the thing, right? So this is like one example. Or maybe, and I've mentioned this one a couple of times, maybe you want to work on the habit of like paying yourself first. So make it really obvious. Every time I get paid, I will send $5 to saving. Um, I am going to make it really attractive by naming my account, the thing that I want. Maybe you're saving for your ideal home. So you can name your bank account that, so you're reminded of that every time. And then you make it really easy by making it a small amount at first, and then you automate it from your paycheck. And you make it satisfying by maybe having a visual tracker where you're keeping track, you're coloring each line so you see it changing. And also, like every time you do it, you can celebrate. I also want to mention that companies always also use these things against us. So they are very good at using the science of how our brains work to their advantage. So they are very good at making themselves very obvious, right? So that's why we have commercials and we have brands that are everywhere so that we have cravings to consume, and then the action that they want is like for us to obviously buy their product. So they're constantly trying to figure out how to like make things easy and make things really satisfying. So you have different examples here of how they give you the option of like putting your credit card information in so that you can buy with one click, or you have the app right on your phone, so it's like very easy for you to take that step. So when we're thinking about how do we break bad habits, we have to think about the opposite of what we just talked about. So how do we make things invisible so that we're not seeing that cue all the time? How do we make it like not so easy or not so attractive? And some ideas around that are doing things like checking your subscriptions, because the reason why everybody and their brother wants you to subscribe to things is because that's that one-time action that you do that is going to ensure that you keep paying that money. So check your subscriptions. Maybe there are things that you're paying for that like you forgot about. Unsubscribe from marketing emails, like especially at this time of the year that they're like sending you a million emails telling you all the deals that you're missing out on. Sometimes you have to like unfollow people from social media, taking your credit cards out of things like Amazon so that you have to like increase that step that you have to do in order to buy. It could be deleting apps from your phone. It could be having rules around, you know what, like if I am going to buy something, I have to like physically go into the store. I'm not able to do online shopping. So you want to give yourself time to be able to not have that instant action, right? So those are just a few ideas. There are a lot more, and some common mistakes to avoid when you're thinking about habits is, starting too big. Again, focus on like what's easy. What can I do on a very bad day? And then you can always increase it as you get more comfortable. Maybe try not to change like everything at the same time. I know the new year is coming, and sometimes we go into the new year with that energy, like I am going to save money and drink water and move my body and like do all the things. Think about again like how much energy you have and how many resources sometimes you have to use to change something, and focusing on one thing at a time is the best way, and making it super easy so that you can be successful and then you can celebrate. So that's like the last thing that I want to talk about. Celebrate, 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 even if it's a little step, right? Sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit, and I'm like, oh, why should I celebrate that? You want to celebrate that because that is how your brain is going to want to repeat whatever it is. And we have to remember that the cool thing about habits that we started the presentation with is that little by little, you make big change. So make sure that you're celebrating immediately and that you find ways that the celebration feels good to you. And that might be different for everybody. Maybe, like I said, just you saying to yourself, like, good job. Is enough for you, but maybe you need like a little reward. I'm gonna take myself out to a nice lunch or something like that. So it's really important that you are giving yourself credit for the little changes that you're making and that you are celebrating. And lastly, sometimes you need that accountability, right? Sometimes that's like part of the process, and being in community, like telling other people what you're working on, getting your like friends in on what it is that you're working on helps you. Sometimes if you share like, oh, I'm working on, saving this amount, or I'm working on not eating out as much, people can help you stay accountable, but they also might be inspired, and then maybe you guys can collaborate and share ideas. Another thing to do is work with a coach. I am going to, the last slide here that I have is that as part of the Worth and Wealth program, you have access to me for one-on-one coaching. And part of the coaching is having someone that's going to like keep you accountable. So here is the information for that. You can use that QR code, and you can set up an appointment with me, and I will be more than happy to be your accountability buddy so that we can work on all those habits that are going to help us get to where we want to go. And I am sorry, I usually try to have some time for the comments. I will hang around here if you have questions or comments, but if you need to go, I know that we are at time. But thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you taking your time to spend it with us.